Analytics, the premier show about Schmoedown, statistics, and stuff. I am your host, Double D Dan Dolinsky, and as always, we got Kiwi Jess, my co-host. How you doing, Jess?
I'm doing good. I mean, that song's always really good to get me started first thing in the morning because it's Sunday morning here. So it's a great way to get the day started.
Absolutely. And joining us for today is Aaron. How you doing, Aaron?
Good, good. Happy to be here. Happy New Year to everybody since I've
Happy
been in
New Year.
hibernation with all this stuff. But nice to be here. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you being on the show. And I also appreciate everyone joining us on the show. It's great to be back for another week. So we're going to start off with the show with analysts. And I can't speak right now. Retro analysis. Can't speak today. And we're going to do it a little bit different from last week. Last week we kind of just talked about our thoughts on the show on the matches. Today we're going to be a little bit more specific, and I'm going to ask one question to my host and Aaron, and we're going to talk about that. So first up, our first match is going to be the Patriots versus top 10, or as what people like to call it, the Jane Fonda incident.
Yes.
Yeah. So for everyone to remember, let's break down what actually happened in that. Uh, Jeff Snyder spun the wheel in the betting round, and he landed on Westerns. Uh, the Patriots bet 1 point. Top 10 bet 3 points because John Roca felt confident to win that question. But when the question was asked, obviously JT and Jeff Snyder said Clint Eastwood. They got it wrong, lost 1 point. John Roca just scribbled something and said Jane Fonda. And ultimately, Christian Harloff decided that that was worthy enough
Yes.
to award them points. That caused a big controversy and that led to many other things. But here's the question. Let's assume that Christian did not award the points to top 10. Now, obviously, the best case scenario that John Roca would probably challenge that. And let's say, just for argument's sake, let's just say that Christian just said the ruling of that challenge would have been top 10 did not get the points because the rules clearly said that you have to write down the answer. So let's just assume, for best case scenario, top 10 did not get those 3 points. And let's assume that the speed round still end up the same exact way. The question is, could top 10 still win that match? Jess, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I mean, I know this is entirely speculative. I don't know. I don't. From the way they were playing, it seemed like the Patriots were in top form. And we like here's the thing is so you're going on the basis that they didn't get awarded the points that they just
They did not get awarded the points. They would lose 3 points. The Patriots would lose 1 point, and the speed round would be the same. That way, they would still go into the final round. That's
I
the
mean, we've seen Roker in the past when he gets a call that he doesn't necessarily agree with. That he did the whole frame of the way he plays the game almost shifts. He almost gets this real. I don't want to say petty attitude, but it's almost changes his whole mindset, and I think that really does affect how he plays the game. So I feel like that would have just started him off on this trajectory of potentially missing a lot more questions because he's frustrated. I think that mindset is such a huge part of this game.
Aaron, what are your thoughts on this?
In terms of would they have, I don't know, but in terms of could being chance, 100%, I think they had a better chance if it had just been denied and they moved on.
Mm-hmm.
Because we saw Roka's mindset was what destroyed them in that match, and
Yeah.
specifically if we're going to talk about the challenge in a little bit, the very odd decision to respin the wheel, the whole process of how everything happened was what really fucked with Roka's head in that minute. Uh, and that's what rattled him and sent him down the path that, I mean, by the end, he's literally just sitting there. He's not even trying. He has
Yes.
mentally given up on himself. Whereas I think if it's as simple as they reject it, they move on, and they go straight into the speed round, I don't think he has as long to kind of fester in the mistake that led to all this. so he's a little bit better. Now, with the point swing, odds are they still lose, but they were in a better headspace going into it because Nost, who rarely gave up because he was rarely that invested, also gave up in that moment. They were both just defeating themselves.
Yeah. So let's take a look at what's the statistics for the final round for both teams. So the Patriots, for their accuracy for that 2-pointer for their 2-pointers is about 80%. Their Patriots accuracy for the 3-pointer is 50%. Their accuracy for the 5-pointer is 100%. Top 10, their accuracy is a little bit less. Their accuracy for their 2-pointer is a little bit better, about 88%. Their accuracy for their 2-pointer, or for the 3-pointer, is 50%, same as the Patriots. And their accuracy for their 5-pointer is 75%. So let's plug that in, assuming that the top 10 actually gets that 2-pointer right off the bat. And let's give top 10 the benefit of the doubt, and let's just say that they get all of those questions right. I know it's very tough, but let's just assume, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. This would have given them 25 points. And based on the speed round, the Patriots have been at 24 points. Based on these statistics, I think the Patriots would have won the match by either their 2-pointer or their 5-pointer. And so, I think the Patriots would still win that match. It probably would have ended either avoiding the TKO, but most likely, I think top 10 would have been TKO'd probably right around the 3-pointer. If not the 5-pointer, because they would need all 3 questions in order to avoid that TKO.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the second match, and I'm kind of rearranging some of these matches because I have a specific reason. Shirewolves versus Sick in the Head. Now, to kind of put some context into this, this was Sick in the Head's premier match because Brian Chandler had won the free-for-all that year. She used that free-for-all to challenge the Shirewolves for the title match. That way, a woman would at least be a team's champion in some way, form. But obviously, this did not go Sick in the Head's way. This went to the Shirewolves, who were playing phenomenal that year. I mean, they were just dominating. But the question I want to ask you guys, do you think that Sick in the Head played badly? Because this is a knockout. And in order for a knockout to happen, your one team has to play extremely well to near perfect.
Yeah.
And the opponent team has to play bad. So did Sick in the Head play badly in this match, or was it just because it was the 5-round match?
I'll jump in. I think they played about as well as they could have given the situation, right? It's interesting. If we're not going to talk about the matches in general, it's probably a good thing because I'll say things that people won't like, and I know it. But looking at the match for what it is, Brianne Chandler was a solid enough player, but she was never the best of players. If it wasn't for the fact that she came out at the end of a free-for-all and then won it after just a round or two, she would have never been in the position to be in a title match. Sure. And Brian Baldwin, I believe is his name.
Brian Bishop.
Brian Bishop, excuse me, thank you. Brian Bishop had never played a Schmoedown match before that day and has never played a Schmoedown match since and got thrown into a 5-rounder title match. Yeah, he played one match and it was this one match. I don't know. I believe he's like a radio personality or something in LA, and it's someone that like they knew, and that's how he kind of got brought into it. I didn't know that at the time. I had no clue who he was. So considering he was literally a complete blind rookie who probably got told the rules about 5 minutes before they walked on stage, I think he played about as well as he could have in that context. And so in order for him to win a title, you would have needed a strong A player. And Brianne Chandler, in my opinion, was a strong B player. So a B player and a total rookie, in no scenario were they ever going to win that title, which is part of the reason why I don't love the matchup to begin with. But I think they played as well as they could have. I believe it's like 18 points over 4 rounds is what they put up, which all things considered is solid.
Yeah.
Jess, what do you think?
Well, now that I know that information as well, I do think there's something to like teams that have worked matches together before. I think there's a really good thing about finding that rhythm as a team. It's you see it all the time with new teams as they start off pretty shaky. Sorry, that's my dog.
Oh, I thought the cows were coming home. What was that?
Okay, so I think what Jess was saying is that it was a first time match, and you know when a first time match happens, you need to find that energy. Okay,
Are we going into the Cloverfield Lane bunker? What was that noise?
that was her dog. But Jess is onto something. That's a great segue into where I'm going.
That is my dog. He likes to be a siren, and I think he must have heard a siren of some description drive past. I'm sorry.
Hey, I'm all for comedy. So let's look at some of the other teams that have premiered and see how well they did in their premiere match. Now, I know you're. Let me kind of remove a little bit so everybody can see. Give me a second. So down in the bottom here, these are the teams that have premiered, and that's going to be represented by the pink bar. The ones up here could be either premiered or they have been experienced, and that's going to be represented by the blue bar. So it's going to be Sick in the Head premiered against the Shirewolves. And we're only going to look at the end of round 2 because that's the only way we can actually compare it, all these teams together. So at the end of round 2, we could see that Sick in the Head scored 17 points. Shirewolves scored 24 points. Yes, it's a 7-point deficit, but it's not something that if this was a 3-round match, you would still go into the final match round, and of course you have to fight harder, but it's still possible to be in that. You'll probably be a TKO. I'm sorry, instead of a knockout. But let's look at Wild Berries versus Shirewolves, if my computer will work. So yeah, Wild Berries scored 15 points in their debut match against the Wolves of Steel, another Clark Wolf team. And the Wolves of Steel scored 22 points, and the Shirewolves went on to win that match as well. But let's look at critically acclaimed and only stupid answers. Critically acclaimed premiered with 23 points at the end of round 2. And they went on to win that match, and only stupid answers scored 17 points. So as you can see, it's kind of pretty much in the general area just based on these 6 teams right here. But let's look at Team Action versus Night Sisters, because these teams actually premiered in the exact same match. Team Action scored 18 points, and Night Sisters scored 11 points. So again, it's 17 points is just 1 point away from 18, so it's not that bad. Nerds Watch versus Above the Line. Above the Line scored 24 points against Nerds Watch, which they scored 15 points, and they went on to win the match as well. Above the Line won the match. And Shirewolves versus Lions Dens. This was kind of a grudge match between Ken and Rachel, but Shirewolves scored 20 points. Lions Den scored 17 points, and really going into the final round, Lions Den could have won that match. It was very close, pretty close, and I think that had they gotten a match earlier, they could have actually performed better. If Sick in the Head actually played another match earlier, they could have actually won that match against the Shirewolves. So they can. Yeah.
Is 30 the total amount of points they could possibly get out of these matches, or is it?
It was
total
30,
amount of points.
Yeah, if you didn't count for steals, it's 30 points.
Okay.
But if you look at just the pink bars, which are the ones that premiered, it's pretty close. It's only within like at the highest 7 points, and obviously there's one that's like 6 points down. So it's close enough to where they premiered pretty well, but for a 5-round match, it just wasn't a good score to have in a 5-round match.
Yeah.
I also think it's worth noting, if you look at the 6 pink bars, the ones that did better had championship level players on the team. Bibiani was already a top player by the time Critically Acclaimed debuted. Above the Line had Drew McWeeny and Sam Levine, with Levine obviously having already competed for a title and was on his way to another one. And the Shirewolves had Clark Wolf, who had also already competed for a title by that point. So I think that stands as part of it.
But I would say that Clark Wolf's match against Dan Murrell, that was not the first time that happened. That was not a great match for her to have. She obviously the buzzer round really what killed her, and we can actually say the same thing with Sick in the Head as well, because they were not prepared with that buzzer. Well, they were a little bit prepared. It was the betting round that really killed them.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the final match in our retro analysis: Odd Couple versus Only Stupid Answers. I know people are like, why is this one memorable? This is the only match where a team or competitor has never played their round two. Never has that ever happened before or since.
Mm-hmm.
So the question, obviously I have a question up here, but I feel like you guys would not be able to answer that because it's math related. But let me ask you guys this. Do you think that this would ever happen again, where a team or a competitor would not go to round two in their match, in a 3-round match?
I mean, currently,
yes.
I mean, looking at the level of competitors we have, I just don't really see it being that someone does that poorly. I don't imagine with the caliber of competitors we have nowadays that it could really happen. I maybe with someone who's an absolute rookie versus someone who's a long-time vet and they're just really not playing the game. Potentially. I mean, you never say never, but I just think with the kind of players we see coming up in all the divisions, I just don't imagine it happening.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I also think it's worth noting that, in my opinion, the 2019 season, which was 6, if I count back correctly, was the year that I think we really saw the transition from like anyone could play to, okay, this is uber competitive. You have to be on your game in order to play. And Only Stupid Answers were kind of one of the last remnants of a team that neither of them clearly studied or prepped that hard coming in, but it wasn't looked upon as a bad thing. They were just guys who were entertainers who were here to play.
Mm-hmm.
They showed up, they did their thing. I think they were like 1-2 at that point, 1-3 if you count the match where only one of them showed up. So their whole thing was, they were just there to have fun and play, whereas the Odd Couple were one of the first teams in that instance of, okay, now this is getting uber competitive. These guys are studying together. They're grinding. They are putting in the work to be the best. And so it's just this complete odd mismatch of a lineup where you have the last remnants of what did exist and one of the first of what's to come playing each other. And I think that's why it resulted in such a lopsided match. Obviously, I know there's rule changes coming up for the new year, and I'm not 100% certain on all of them. I haven't been up on everything that's being done. But unless teams like Only Stupid Answers come back into play, where these are just comedians and YouTubers and guys that are here for fun, I don't think it's possible that anyone would play that badly.
Yeah, Diggin actually pulls up a really good point about the new rules being implemented. That one, where with the new rules, 10 questions in each round. If someone scores 0 and the other player goes perfect, gets their bonus, it would be tough not to get a KO. And that's a perfect segue because this is what will happen in the new rules. So singles, IG, and Star Wars are going to be the exact same point structure. And if one competitor goes perfect in round 1, scoring 11 points, another competitor scores 0, and competitor 1 just crushes their round 2 up until their fifth question, they have the chance to knock out the competitor right here with 2 points. If they check down to multiple choice, there is that possibility that competitor 2 will go into their KO, their round 2. However, they cannot miss a single question. They cannot go to multiple choice at any sort. Even if they miss it, it's done. So right here is where it can early happen in singles, IG, and Star Wars. And in teams, the earliest it can happen is same exact scenario. Again, I know this is an extreme case, but we got to know where these lines are. It can happen as early as the 3rd question. So again, it is an extreme scenario. I don't think this will happen at all because for everything that you just said, but based on what I've seen so far, the amount of competitors that get knocked out is anywhere between 2 or 6% of competitors. That's still low compared to everyone else. So I don't think that this will ever happen, but it's nice to know where that line is so we can have a good graph as you'll see coming later in the show. But
and it's also, well, I was going to say, if you don't mind, it's also worth noting with this match, the thing that sealed it was Odd Couple made a choice to go first. I feel like, and I don't know the statistics, that would probably be you, but more and more, I feel like players are leaning to going second than they are going first, which also makes it less likely. Because if they had let Only Stupid Answers go first, then obviously that stat never exists.
Yeah, actually, interesting enough, if Only Stupid Answers went first, they would need to get every single one right. Because I did kind of the scenario, if they missed anyone, they're done. So it would have resulted in a knockout at that point in time as well. But by going first, it ensures that the Patriots would actually guarantee that knockout because they were on fire that match. So yeah, that will do for our retro analysis. Tell me, guys, in the chat, what do you guys think? Do you think that this was? Do you think these matches were great? Do you think they were? Do you think our analysis was good or bad? Leave your comments down in the chat. But let's go on to my usual topic, which is we're leaving the sexy at the door. Roxy Stryer actually called me up saying, "Leave the sexy with me. You're ugly." So okay, I have to listen to Roxy. So we're changing the title to "Crunching Numbers with Double D," as where I take a more broader question rather than a specific question, and I ask my co-hosts what their thoughts are. So the question this week is: would corruption win under the season 8? Win season 8 under the season 7 point system? Now, before my guests, my co-hosts answer this question, I want to talk to the viewers in the chat. Leave your comments down below, so that way we can actually read your comments before we go on to the analysis. And before I ask the answer, get your thoughts. Let's review what the point system was. In singles and teams, regular matches were worth 2 points, and title matches were worth 3 points instead of 7 or 8 points. And there was no bonus if you defended the belt. Title matches were only 3 points in singles and teams. In Inner Geekdom and Star Wars, regular matches were worth 3 points. Title matches were worth 4 points. So there's that little nugget. All tournament matches, and this includes tournament finals, were worth 3 points. Spectacular matches were worth only 5 points. That's half of what spectacular points were now. And there was no -1 in TKOs and knockouts. And actually, if you won by knockout or TKO, you got an additional point. Let me move. There are 2 other things that I want to talk about that aren't in the point system, and that is, hold on. So the next rule is the free-for-all MVP is still awarded 3 points. That was not included in the old point system, but I'm still keeping it up because we didn't have a free-for-all. The free-for-all. We did have a free-for-all in season 7, but we didn't have the free-for-all. So I'm still awarding the 3 points to the MVP. And the Roca versus Merle match at Spectacular, that is not played for any amount of points. I'm still keeping up with that for this season. And going on to what the records were, we're only looking at 3 factions. Corruption, the Stock Exchange, and the Dungeon. Corruption's record is 24-21 with 4 knockouts. The Finstock Exchange, 35 wins, 19 losses, 12 knockouts. The Dungeon, 23 wins, 20 losses, 7 knockouts. I know that's a lot of information for you guys, but what is your answer based on all of this information? Do you think Corruption could actually win Season 8 under this system, or do you think someone else would win?
I feel like it would have been Finstock based on the win-loss record, the fact that they've got 12 knockouts, and then also the fact that the spectacular matches have been halved in terms of points. I feel like looking at that, and without obviously running the numbers, I don't know. I feel like potentially they wouldn't have.
All right. What do you think, Aaron? Do you agree with Kiwi, or do you have a different opinion?
I agree. I personally, looking at it from an outside perspective, I don't think they would have. Where Corruption made up a lot of their ground this season in losing all the little matches, a lot of their back half lineup players didn't do very well. They had almost no presence in Star Wars this year. Where that was made up for was both Marisol and Mike winning the belts at about the halfway point of the season. Mike's was even a little earlier than that. And they just continued to defend and win. And that racked up a bunch of points, including 2 wins at Spectacular. With those point values being greatly reduced and it being more about just wins and losses, I think it goes to it would go to either Finstock or Dungeon. And what I think even puts Finstock above that is in this season, -1s were given to opponents, but you didn't get a +1 for TKO, and most of those 12 KOs were TKOs. So that's just point for them, putting them above them. So I certainly don't think Corruption would have won it.
All right. So if we can bring up some of the comments from the people in the chat. I think from Dagan.
Next one's more full. There we go.
I think it's definitely possible that they would have given all their tournament and title win accomplishments. I think he means the Finstock. Corruption. I think he means Corruption. So that's interesting. Do we have any more? Is it only Dagan? Okay, I think let's take a look from February. The race was from February to May.
Mm-hmm.
If I would click on my.
There we go. One less tumble.
Yeah. So from in March, at the end of March, we could see that the Dungeon would be leading with 10 points, but Finstock Exchange would be right on the heels of the Dungeon with 9 points, and Corruption would be at 4 points by the end of March. And here's some of the March highlights. Mara won the IG title match. Dan Merle beats Jeff Snyder in a #1 contender match. Ben Bateman beats Mark Riley in a singles match. Roca played perfect against Liz Shannon Miller, and the Finstock Exchange won 3 out of their 4 matches that month. So it's interesting to note that in the actual season, the Dungeon was still #1 at this time. But as we go into April, the Dungeon was still #1 at this point. But we can see that the Finstock Exchange takes an early lead, overtaking him with 23 points. Dungeon's at 20 points, and there's a huge gap between the Corruption and the Dungeon, almost 11 points. And here's some of the highlights. Exchange only lost 1 match out of their 6 matches that they played for that month. Dungeon lost 3 out of the 7 matches, so that's why they kind of went down a bit. Dan Merle won back the singles belt, and Mike Kalinowski won the #1 contender match. And going into May, the lead just gets bigger. I mean, this is a 7-point lead from first and second place with Finstock Exchange winning. And now Corruption, they gain the distance. It's 9-point difference, but they're still behind from the Finstock Exchange. And here's some of the main highlights. Danger Zone, they win the teams tournament, but lose the #1 contender match to Corruption. Mike won the IG title match against Mara. Marisol won against Janine in a singles match going into Kevin Smith. Gold Leader won his match against Marie Wilson. And the Finstock Exchange gains 2 extra points for their knockouts. So it's looking like the Finstock Exchange takes an early lead. But we've seen them take an early lead in last season. Do you think that this trend will continue, or do you think that Corruption could actually go?
Absolutely. Look at Griffin Newman and Barbarian both sort of leading, as well as him in the teams matches. I just see it going up from here.
What do you think, Aaron? Do you think there's a chance for Corruption to catch up?
I think they'll catch up and get closer. I don't think they'll pass them.
All right, well, let's go on to the next set of months. This is June from August. So, as you can see, the Finstock Exchange continues to grow their lead. It's an 11-point lead, apart from the 7-point lead that they had in May. And obviously, the distance between June.
Dagan, I think you might have called that wrong.
Yeah, I think Dagan got it wrong. Actually, I know it.
I'm so sorry, Dagan, but I think you got it wrong. yeah.
But it does. But the good thing about corruption is that they are closing the gap between themselves and the dungeon. Before it was a 9-point gap. This is a 8-point gap, so it is getting close. Some highlights from June: Parker beats Chance, JTE beats Paul Preston, Bateman beats Roca, Gold Leader beats Zach Burkett, but loses to Thomas Harper. So this is probably why the Finstock Exchange continues to grow. But interestingly enough, in July, they start to level out. They didn't win a lot of matches this month. This was kind of like everyone's, at least 3 factions' worst month. Marisol wins the number 1 contender match against Kevin Smith. Claudia Duff beats Christy V. This was Corruption's only 2 wins for this month. Brother Luminous wins 1 match for the Finstock Exchange. David Del Rio wins 1 match for the Dungeon. So this is where everyone kind of levels off. August. They grow, but the Finstock Exchange just continues to grow their lead. This is a 13-point lead from Finstock Exchange in the Dungeon. This is a 21-point difference between Finstock Exchange and Corruption. So here's some August highlights. Robert Parker gets a TKO from gives TKO's Jesse Swift. That's an additional point for the Dungeon. Chance not TKO's Mark Haas. Bonus point for Corruption. JT TKO's Chance in a number 1 contender S. Another point for the Finstock Exchange. Mike Kalinowski defends IG against Amaru Moses. Chance wins the number 1 match.
Schmoedown, man. Schmoedown.
Ty Lieberman, Wilkie Newman, David Del Rio, and Ben Bateman advance in the singles tournament. So yeah, Finstock Exchange is on the rise. What do you guys think? Do you think that they're gonna? Do you think that the Finstock could actually continue? Do you still want to hold on to your belief that the Finstock Exchange will win?
Yep.
Aaron?
I think if the Schmoedown makes a comeback next year, they'll win Comeback of the Year at the end of next year.
Okay. All right, good. So let's move on to the final 3 months. September to so from August to September. Honestly, Corruption and the Dungeon start to catch up. It's only 11-point difference between the Dungeon and Corruption, and it's only a 14 gap in September for Corruption and the Finstock Exchange. But here are the highlights from the tournament. Griffey Nooms and Barbarian face each other in the singles tournament finals. Gold Leader makes it to the Star Wars tournament finals, but loses to Nikki. King Arthur wins the teams tournament, but loses to Shazam. Mike defends the belt again against no, this was Amaru. I'm sorry, this was Amaru. The first one was, forget who the first one.
It was Chandru, Amaru, and then Parker.
Chandru. This was against Chandru. Marisol defends the singles belt from Chance and Griffey Newman. Robert Parker wins IG tournament but loses to Mike. Here's what happens. In October, at the end of October, Finstock Exchange is at 84 points. If I was doing my forecast, I would say the Finstock are running away with this match, and I think that they would be unstoppable. I think no one would be able to catch up at this point. From October to November, Finstock Exchange continues to grow to 104 points. Neither Corruption or the Dungeon advances from their current scores in October. And we saw what happened at Spectacular. Even though Corruption defends their 2 belts, gets 10 extra points,
the points difference.
Yeah.
That is insane.
Yeah,
That is
they would have,
insane.
the Finstock Exchange would have won under the old point system. And interestingly enough, the dungeon would not have been in third place. Quirky Mercs would have been in third place with 69 points. So yeah, they're not even third place.
Interesting.
But now here's the interesting question. The reason why the new point system was changed, why the old system was changed to the new system, is because Christian wanted the title matches and the spectacular matches to give a boost. But by doing so, but in the old system in last season, Shannon didn't need to win. The Corruption didn't need to win any match for any title match of spectacular to win the points race. She just needed Alex Damon to win his belt, or at the very least have Swag not knock out Alex, because that would have gave Shannon the win.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, by changing it up this season, Aaron, you were with me about talking about the different scenarios. 3 out of the 4 belts affected the winner. So was the new point system a success, or was it not a success? Jess, we'll talk. What do you think? Do you think it was a success or no?
I mean, I think this just shows that adding those extra difference in points can make a whole, because going into Spectacular, it was a lot tighter of a race than what it showed.
Yeah.
If we went by the old system, and I don't know if that means that it's good or it was bad, but I feel like if you look at the difference in wins and losses, the win-loss record with the Finstock Exchange versus Corruption, they won a hell of a lot more matches, and yet they still had such a tight margin. Yes,
Aaron,
Yes,
do you think it was a successful implementation, or do you think that they should have gone with the old point system?
Well, first, to respond to Dagan's comment about them having it locked up before Spectacular, they would have had it locked up by like February if we're going off this chart.
They
Like,
would have locked it up by October.
Yeah, like realistically, it would have been locked well before then. But no, I think the changes were good. I think we saw in season 7 a lot of the factions kind of picked up on the fact that because of the way the points were structured, regular matches mean this much less than title matches, but regular matches get played so much more. I mean, I think that was the season, right, where we saw Mike had a 2-match run to the title, and he said, F that, I'm going to go for the tournament, because even if I only get as far as I would have in this number 1 contendership run, I'm still going to get more points for doing so. So I'm going to do that, and that's exactly what happened. So I think rearranging it to make the titles matter more, which means you now have an incentive to work your way to the top, because it's a big boost of points every time you get it. I mean, as you said, we're talking about Exchange, Corruption, and the Dungeon. Quirky Mercs aren't even in our conversation, but they would have finished above the Dungeon because they had Shazam all year. Defend. They had Dimolanta for the first few months. Defend. They didn't need to win any other matches, or not a lot of other matches, because they were getting boosted by those wins. So I think for the league overall, when the belts are what you've built the foundation upon, I think season 7 needed to happen the way that it did, so that you could realize, okay, we have to restructure this somehow to make the belts matter more, because teams won't care if it means they can't play.
Yeah, and this is giving me a pause to think that Christian Harloff has bugged my office somewhere. I couldn't confirm it until I watched the Schmoedown rundown this week. Now I have confirmed that somewhere Christian has bugged my office. I haven't found the bug, but oh wait, I just found it. It's right here. I'll talk more about that as we go on to the next segment of our show, and that's called New Data. And obviously in analytics, we just don't talk about numbers, but we talk about new information, new data. And what was big hyped about with the rundown this week was the season 9 rules. We're going to have some new rules next season. And we're going to start off with there's going to be a new line judge. This person who's ideally, he's going to be one of the writers of the questions. He's going to assist the host. Now, if you really want to know the full context, go watch the rundown, because they will give more context. This is just what I took from that, just basic concept. But a new line judge will assist the host whether answers are correct or the rules are being followed. Because I know there were some issues about like Muppets in space, Muppets from space, Muppets Treasure Island, Muppets Treasure Island. That will now be changed because the new line judge will actually assist with that. Typically, obviously, I said this be typically a writer, but this person will not be a current competitor or a current manager. So there's not any bias to one faction or another.
Yeah.
This person will have a printed copy of the rule book, and this person will know it. They can actually pull it out and know exactly what the rule will be. Another thing is that the competitors can still challenge the line judge's rule because nobody's perfect. Sometimes they make a mistake. Competitors can say, well, wait a minute, this thing happened and it's like this, and they can actually do more research. So that's another important thing. And I think a couple more is, number one, this person will also be at free-for-alls in case something gets by the host. Because obviously we talked about Muppets from Space or Muppets from Space, whichever one is the correct title. The incorrect title was set at free-for-all and obviously moves so fast. Sometimes you just can't get it. So the line judge will actually say, hey, it's actually this. Don't give them a point. So it's so that will help. He'll help with that. And that'll be it. So what do you guys think? Do you think that this is a good new rule or not? Aaron, we'll start with you.
I'm going to use a comparison that I don't know how many people will understand, but as somebody who loves real football, better known to most viewers as soccer, I watch a lot of Premier League football in England, and I'm sure I know other countries have this too, but they have this thing called VAR, video assisted referee. And it's basically the idea of you always have another person from a kind of a video screen elsewhere from a bird's eye view watching the game and making calls as the referee is making calls. And so if there's a confusion or an issue, they can discuss that and come to a proper conclusion on what it should be. Now, if you watch the Premier League, you know that they fuck up VAR all the time. That's another discussion. The concept is actually a really good idea for helping keeping the game fair. And I like this. Having somebody who on hand knows the rules in and out, and they have no other job except just paying attention and making sure that nothing slips by will alleviate a lot of the pressure on Christian, Mark, Drew, whoever is at the hosting desk for that specific match, because it means that they're not going to have to focus on also remembering an entire rule book and keeping things straight. I think one of the things that was I remember hearing a while ago was in the match where I forget what it was. I think it was the Barbarian Drew McWeeny match where it was in his argument, Sam quoted something from the rule book, but he actually misconstrued the quote and said it in a way that helped him when the actual rule in the rule book doesn't help what he was trying to sell. And because Lieberman was Barbarian's manager, he obviously didn't know it offhand, so he couldn't argue it.
Yep.
And neither of the guys on the desk also had it offhand reference, so they couldn't know whether or not he was getting it right or not. So they kind of just had to go with what was said. Having someone always there whose sole job is to know this will keep the rules of the game fair if they want this to be a rule-structured thing. So I think it's a great advancement.
What do you think, Jess? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree. Having someone that's completely impartial, that's not running a game, because running a game and trying to keep your scope to everything is actually really difficult. When you're also trying to be entertaining while hosting a match, it's just nice to have someone else sort of as that safeguard. And I think it's going to help with a lot of the calls that they make. And hopefully it means a lot less people feel a need to challenge things, but who knows? We'll have to see how they run it. But I think it's a really great idea and concept.
I was going to say, if I could, to use like an example from the match we talked about earlier, the Roca, the top 10 Patriots match, for anyone who goes back and watches that match, I kind of alluded to it. But the weirdest thing about that whole challenge was at some point they decided to respin the wheel, despite the fact that the wheel spin was not the issue with the whole round.
No.
And it later was found out that the reason that happened is because at some point Jeff Snyder just kind of put it out there. Why don't we just respin the wheel, restart the whole thing? And somebody was just kind of like, oh, okay. And I don't blame Jeff for that. He should be trying to get every advantage he can.
Yeah.
But obviously the people who are making the decisions are also people running the matches. But how did you think? Oh yeah, let's just listen to what the guy on the other team said. That's a great idea. We'll run with that. Having someone impartial would whiff that out and say, no, Jeff suggested that. Why would we listen to him? Do the rules.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I actually thought there was I think there was always a third person judging this. I was always under the impression that there was a third person, a line judge already present, because I remember in the first New York match, there was a challenge, and Rachel Cushing came out and gave her opinion on this. Of course, she was a competitor at that point, so this actually allows uh, someone who is impartial, at least someone who's not competing, not have any bias in any faction. So I like this new rule. It's great. I think it should have been implemented a little bit sooner. Next up, we have title accuracy. So yeah, this has been a big. Obviously, we talked about Muppets from Space, Muppets in Space, Muppets Treasure Island, Muppets Treasure Island. They have to say the correct title. That is the biggest takeaway. They have to say, but for example, articles can be omitted if the title is long enough. So, for example, Silence of the Lambs. That is accepted because we all know what it means. The Silence of the Lambs is the full title. So omitting that at the beginning is fine. They're giving a little bit leeway, but something that is not accepted is A Silence of Lambs. That you can't change even though there's lambs and silence, you need some of the articles, or at least that's that. You can't have you have to have either Silence of the Lambs, or The Silence of the Lambs. A Silence of the Lambs does no, that will not be awarded. Other things is articles within the titles must be stated. So, for example, like we talked about, The Lambs, that has to be stated. Back to the Future Part 2, part needs to be there. You can't just say the number of the movie. Godfather Part 2, the part has to be in there. Raya the Last Dragon would be wrong. It's Raya and the Last Dragon.
Yeah.
Those articles must be stated. But another important note is certain answers can be accepted depending on how the question is written. So, for example, if I said, what George Lucas movie came out in 1977, the correct title would be Star Wars: A New Hope. And I know the audience can't see it, but you would need to say Star Wars: A New Hope. That is the accepted title. Even though Star Wars was the official title, the accepted answer is Star Wars: A New Hope, because there are many Star Wars movies. But if the question was written, what Star Wars movie came out in 1977, you can just simply say A New Hope, because it's already been clarified that we're talking specifically about a Star Wars movie that came out in 1977. So honestly, I think this is great. I think this is something that I've been kind of pressing for over a year now. But Jess, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I fully agree, especially when I remember the Raya the Last Dragon thing being quite hotly contested amongst a lot of the fans, and I do think that there needs to be more accuracy, especially when you had Brendan Meyer that did the Muppets movie, and it was the Muppet movie, and that's a single letter versus leaving out an and, which I think completely changes the context of the title. It goes from being Raya being the last dragon to and having the last dragon. So I think, if you're not going to award someone for a single S, how can you award someone for leaving out an and, which completely changes what the title even means?
Aaron, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad this is being outlined, because this was one of those issues where it was rather inconsistent depending on the day and what the situation was. And I'm glad that there's officially an outlining for it being stated. I agree with the allowances that they're giving. If you drop the article at the start of a film, I get it, because, it's one little word, but having them in the middle is important, because at that point it's a part of the title. I do like the addition as well of if it's stated within a franchise, you don't feel the need to write the rest of them, because an example of that is Harry Potter. All of those have subtitles, but they all start with Harry Potter and the. So that's 4 words. You now have to, you can cut those out if they're asking about a Wizarding World or Harry Potter specified question that you don't feel the need to write so that you don't get penalized, because that's a lot of the time you see people scribbling and it's because they're trying to fit all the other stuff in. So I do like the corrections that are being made. Yeah, and I agree with you. The Raya of the Last Dragon one was something that I disagreed with at the time, and I still do, because it does, that contextually changes what the title is in terms of how you would say that in an English sentence. And again, it's a case of, at least for me, the inconsistency was always, are you a show where you have to have an idea of what it is, or do you have to know what it is? And that's where the confusion was. So I like that we're taking steps to, this is the direction we want to go, this is the rule that's implemented, and with the line judge again, it'll be more hopefully kept in check.
Yeah. So next rule, is it? Yeah, we're gonna go through a little. They're big rules, but they basically.
Oh, Thomas Harper's shaking.
Yeah. So whiteboard rule. Whiteboards are only allowed in round 1, betting round, and sudden death. Yeah, Thomas Harper is not allowed to use it the whole match. Now, again, this was kind of grandfathered in because, it was a product of the time. It was a digital match, and you had to keep your hands up so that way nobody was going to cheat, but you wanted at least that visualization. So I don't blame Thomas Harper for using the whiteboard, because you need to keep your hands up, and what better way to have something in your hand, and he just had the whiteboard, so it wasn't like he was doing it out of malice. It's just like part of the rules that you wanted to be fair. So I think this was fair in the digital age, but now that we're going into live studio matches, it makes more sense that they would just get away with it, do away with it. But another thing, inner geekdom categories can show up in singles and teams. Now, this could be Harry Potter. This could be swashbuckling films. This could be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This is, I think, good because it does allow a little bit more flexibility. Let me look at my notes because I want to make sure I don't go over it. Okay, so the next rule is there's going to be a streaming slice. Since we are still in this pandemic, some movies are going to streaming, and obviously with new releases, it creates this little controversy. So they are going to have a list provided to the players of acceptable streaming movies. So if something comes up like in 2020, let's say it's Ice Mountain, Adventures of the Water Bottle, and it's not on the list, Ice Mountain is not going to be asked about. But if it is on the list, then it will not be asked. But players will be made aware of streaming movies that will appear in categories. So if there's like let's say there's an Inner Geekdom movie coming out onto streaming. Maybe it's the new let's say Robert Pattinson's Batman, and that goes on to stream on HBO Max, and it's obviously an IG category, and there's a question about the Batman that's in that category. People will be made aware of this question, so that way they can at least watch the movie and study it before they get asked that. And those are the last other rules that are small, but we will talk about other rules these are just like miscellaneous rules. Do you think so? What do you think, Aaron? Do you think that these are good rules to have? Do you think that maybe the whiteboard is just like, whatever? Or do you think that these are all good rules?
The whiteboard one, I don't care about personally. Not that I'm for it or against it. It's just they've made a decision. This is the decision they've gone with. I will say it will be interesting to see Thomas Harper play, because he did play live and he won, but he still had the whiteboard. And clearly it's a mental thing for him in terms of helping his memory to have something to write. So I'm very curious to see if that will affect him at all or how it will.
Yeah.
The IG thing, they've been flirting with it for years. Like, they've started seasons off putting them in and then taking them out. I hope they just commit to it, because at the end of the day, yes, IG is its own separate thing, but those are also all films. They shouldn't be excluded just because IG is a thing. Now, I think, and I imagine they'll maintain this, they shouldn't be as hard. They should not be nearly as hard and deep as the IG questions are, but you should be able to spin a geek category, especially since they broadened it last year. You should absolutely be able to. And then, yeah, the streaming thing, I 100% agree. And like, as somebody who myself, when it comes to watching and kind of reviewing and talking about films, I think you can tell the difference between something that was meant to be legitimate that went to streaming and something that was made on a cheap dime by Netflix to put content out. Like, there is a difference in quality.
Mhm.
So, like, I imagine, like, Spike Lee has a Netflix deal, or Aaron Sorkin's last 2 films have been streaming films. Those will count, like, absolutely. But the third Kissing Booth film probably won't fucking count.
Ugh, I hope
And
not.
if it does, God help all of you, because I've had to see those thanks to people my age, and they're awful.
I think the main takeaway was that, at least in this aspect, is that Bibb said, like, we're not going to look for like obscure movies on Netflix. If it's like in a public eye, then we'll put it on there. But this will be the list. The list will be updated, and people will be made aware of it, so they can be able to view it before the match. Jess, so what are your thoughts on these new rules?
I personally don't think that using a whiteboard in any other round gives you any sort of advantage. More so, like, I think we all learn differently. We all recall information differently. I don't see the reason why they necessarily get rid of it. It's not like it's giving anyone an advantage, but that's how they're going to play it this year. Yeah, I do think that in a geekdom category should show up. Because it's singles is all movies, and it's all movies but at the moment. And yeah, there definitely should be a streaming slice, because I think we've all realized that we're going to be doing a lot of these things on streaming services for possibly a little bit longer, so why not have that as a category?
All right, so moving on to one of the bigger topics. This is why I think Christian has bugged my office. I swear of it, because Aaron, we talked about this when Mike and Janine, after their match, Mike had said that we're going to get rid of spinners and opponent's choice next season. And we discussed on what are the options that could happen. And one thing that I stated was there was Monopoly. There's these squares on in Monopoly where it's chance and community chess, and you don't know which you're going to get. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But and I think I said is that the thing is you can spin away from it. That was the main takeaway. So here's the new rule for spinners and opponent's choice. There's going to be 3 wild card slices. 1 will contain spinner's choice. 1 will contain opponent's choice. 1 will contain a brand new category that has never been played before. Players have the option to spin away from it. And if a player lands on it, I didn't put that in there, but if they don't know if the player lands on it their second time, they don't know what the category is, so they're taking a risk. Now,
so it's like Wheel of Fortune, where they like lift it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if the player does land on spinners and opponent's choice wild card, they can use it. It will be used during the opponent's turn, so it doesn't get removed. So, Aaron, does this sound familiar to you, or is this brand new to you?
Real quick, just because I was reading the comment for Ben Rayner, the Red Notice one.
Yeah.
I would say that 100% counts, because it stars Dwayne Johnson, Ryan Reynolds, and Gal Gadot, 3 actors who have all headlined theatrical films, and Rawson Thurber, who directed it, has a series of theatrically released films. So again, these are not lesser people making a streaming film. This was a film that got sold to Netflix, so I would say that counts. To answer your question, yeah, no, this feels very familiar. I feel like we've had this discussion before.
Yeah. I know where the bug is, Christian. Thank you for listening to me, and actually, I'm very flattered that you actually listened to me. Watch Schmoedown Analytics Saturday at 2 p.m. Central. Thank you. Honestly, I heard this. I was like, they got my idea, so I was freaking out. Jess, what are your thoughts on this new spinners and opponent's choice rule?
Yeah, I like the idea of it. I think it'd be really interesting to see how it works in this new context. But yeah, I do like this idea.
Yeah, the one thing I don't like is that the spinners and opponent's choice gets used again. I would prefer if one person lands on it, it does get removed. I personally would love that. But it's a nitpick, so I'm not going to be too upset about this. I'm just the fact that I'm just geeking out at the fact that they actually listened to my idea and it's now being implemented. So I'm fun for this. Now there's a new division format for the questions. All divisions will have 10 questions in round one, plus a bonus. So that's 11 questions total if they're perfect. Round two will have 5 questions. So whoever is leading at the end of round two, that player in the betting round will have 1 mulligan. So if they land, just basically going back to the the Patriots and top 10 match again. If Jeff didn't like Westerns, he could have spun it again. So it just created that controversy right out. So, and the interest and the remaining rounds, the speed round, the final round, and sudden death will remain the same. Just what do you think about this new digital format? Do you think it's a smart idea? Do you think it's a good idea to have, or a bad idea to uniform all these divisions under a single format, or no?
No, I think it makes it a lot clearer, especially for someone like me that's still getting used to all the formats. So it's going to make things a lot easier on me. But yeah, I don't see anything wrong with it inherently. Like, I'm not swayed one way or the other in terms of it.
Aaron, what do you think? Do you think it's good or no?
Yeah, I like the uniformity of it. I always did think it was weird, like, as somebody who was watching during the years where they were setting all of this up, like when IG started and then Star Wars started. I always thought it was weird that they were all on different question sets and different this and that. So I like the uniformity of it, that it's the same. The leading player having the spin again in the betting round, that's a leave it or take it. I don't really care. It's an extra advantage. It's an incentive to get ahead. But outside of that, it doesn't really matter. Again, I like the uniformity of it. I like that as a player when you're studying, like tactically, I imagine it's very odd for players that are playing like 3 divisions to have to prepare for different format types in each one and have to think about the math of, okay, I have to be here to be in the lead to have a chance if I'm down. Now it's uniform. It's, if you're a manager helping players, you can look at it from one direction and go, these are the battle strategies. Let's go do it. Also, Jesse, if you start that petition for the Harper rule, I'll happily sign it.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so with a new division format, I had to simulate the new format. But good thing is, I only had to do it for teams because singles is literally going to be identical to Star Wars and Inner Geekdom. And Inner Geekdom and Star Wars are not going to change. So really, I only had to change, technically 2, but I only had to simulate 1. I forgot to add one more thing. So here's the outcome for, I just stated. So the outcome, Inner Geekdom and Star Wars will remain the same. The singles graph will match the Inner Geekdom and Star Wars graphs. Teams will change to have its own graph. So let's take a look at what these differences will be and why I like it. So I was kind of debating on whether or not we should return to have the old speed round format or have the digital format, mainly because you have this big gap. So the pink circles right here represent the digital match. In a 5-round match, this represents the dark red is the 5-round the original format. And as you can see, the highest tie score is 32 points. The highest score that's ever been scored was 39-38. If we look at the new format, the highest tie score in the 5-round matches is 36 points. So it gets it that much closer to a more realistic chance to actually score, to actually beat this high score of 39. So I applaud for Christian actually kind of taking my idea of reformatting the divisions, but going in a different way. So I appreciate you. I would have liked my format a little bit better. But the downside with my format is it opens the possibility of more knockouts. So this doesn't. It at least keeps them more uniform and something that we're more familiar with. And like I said, Star Wars and IG stay the same, but teams, this used to be the old one. So the highest tie score for teams is I know it's very small. It's 45 points, but in the new format, the high score is 47. And obviously, the high score that was achieved was 35 points with Shazam versus the outer couple. 2 points may not sound a lot, but I think it's more realistic to get to 47 and then score at least 3 points in sudden death versus 8, because you would have to have a corruption versus Shazam match every single time just to beat 53 points. But with this, it's only 7 points to beat it. So I feel it's more realistic. It's more ideal. What do you guys think? Do you think that it is possible to beat these high scores in the new format, or do you think it's still a little impossible to beat them? Jess, we'll start with you.
I mean, yeah, just looking, I can see the 51-51, and I'm just like, I just don't know if that's even possible to even get that close again. I feel like it was there's too much of a point spread. What is the BOTD rule? I have no idea what that
Benefit
means.
of the doubt.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah,
that benefit of the doubt rule gets tossed around a lot.
Yeah, that's one thing I didn't cover, because it's like it was never meant to be used as a challenge, but they are gonna tweak it a bit. And obviously, I thought that's something I didn't have on the presentation. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of like an easy no-brainer to.
Yeah, it needed to happen. But yeah, I don't know. I guess we're gonna have to wait and see how they adjust to it. We could happen. It could happen, but I don't know if it will.
Yeah, Aaron, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think?
I mean, I absolutely think anything's possible. I think the only reason we got that high in a teams match in the first place was because we had, two teams that were playing at the absolute top echelon of their game. Specifically this year with Shazam, they had the two different matches, right? Because they had the Otter couple one, and then they had the one with Corruption, where both times they were pushed to that type of limit because you just have two teams that are at the absolute threshold of their performance. So I think it's going to take that type of thing to get it there again. Is just simply two teams at the top of their game pushing each other to that limit.
Yeah, I am looking forward to the season. I think it's more possible than it was before. So I think I look forward to see what they do this season. I will. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see next season how they're going to implement this. But that'll do it for today's Schmoedown Analytics, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today, and to our loyal viewers, thank you for joining us on this Saturday. Hopefully, come back next week. We will talk about more analytics, and that'll do for us. And but till next week, stay refreshed.
You know what's cooler than magic?